Today we are going to tell you about escape and chase, but before, don't forget to like and share. Stay with movies.
Operation start. The scene in the neighborhood. It was an ordinary night in the Fergusia Duo neighborhood, with residents wrapping up their daily activities. Few could imagine that, in the coming hours, the area would become the stage for an intense police operation. At 7:30 p.m., the military police team, led by Lieutenant Aguiar, was patrolling the region, conducting routine stops to prevent crimes such as vehicle thefts and burglaries. During this patrol, the officers spotted a motorcycle parked suspiciously with no visible license plates. They decided to approach the young man standing next to the vehicle. At first, the young man, identified only as Rodrigo, tried to remain calm, but it became apparent that his anxiety was growing as the officers questioned him about the motorcycle's registration. The investigation of the motorcycle. Drawing from his experience, Lieutenant Aguiar asked his team to check the motorcycle's chassis against the engine number, which is a common procedure to identify modifications. At this point, the suspicion of the vehicle being cloned or stolen began to strengthen as the number showed signs of tampering. The tension increased as the young man became increasingly evasive in his responses. Dialogue during the approach. "What do you do for a living?" asked the lieutenant, trying to establish a profile of the person he was questioning. "I'm a carpenter, but I'm not working today," Rodrigo responded, visibly uncomfortable. "And this motorcycle? Is it in your name?" the officer continued, paying attention to every detail. "No, the motorcycle belongs to a friend." The situation seemed simple, but the encounter soon revealed itself to be more complex. Other individuals began to appear in the vicinity, leading the officers to call for reinforcements. "Emergency call, robbery in progress." While the team focused on verifying the vehicle, a new emergency arose over the radio. A local resident reported that two armed men had broken into her home and taken hostages, demanding money and belongings. The account was terrifying. They had a pistol and a revolver, yelling for everyone to stay still. "They locked us in the back room," said the victim. The police communication system went into action. Command determined that part of the team should immediately head to the robbery location. The patrol cars, already nearby, arrived at the scene within minutes. Arrival at the scene, critical moment.
Hey, you who are watching
When
a movie.
the police arrived,
I see
the
that you didn't
suspects
leave
were
your
still inside
like and
the
didn't
house,
subscribe to the
searching
channel.
rooms for valuables.
Give me this strength for me to bring
One of
more
them was keeping
content
the
to you.
hostages under constant watch, while the other rummaged through drawers and cabinets. The team set up a silent perimeter, aiming to catch the criminals off guard. However, when attempting to initiate a tactical approach, the criminals became aware of the police presence. In a swift move, one of the men pointed a gun at the officers, triggering the confrontation. The sound of gunfire echoed down the street, startling the residents. Details of the confrontation. The criminal with the pistol fired first, but was quickly shot in the chest by one of the officers, collapsing to the ground. The second criminal, armed with a .38 revolver, attempted to flee through the back of the house, but was also shot after exchanging fire with another team blocking his escape route. Within seconds, both suspects were down, and the situation appeared to be under control. However, the police knew they needed to ensure the location was completely safe before releasing the hostages and beginning evidence collection. After the confrontation, preservation of the crime scene. With the two criminals neutralized, the police began to establish a security perimeter around the house. Forensic experts were called in to conduct ballistic analysis and examine the scene, collecting the suspect's weapons and identifying impact points of the bullets. The crime scene was marked by striking details. The pistol used by one of the criminals had an empty magazine, indicating that he had fired all his shots in a desperate attempt to escape. The .38 revolver found beside the second suspect still had 3 bullets in the chamber, suggesting that he did not have time to empty the gun before being hit. The hostages, still in shock, were led out of the house and placed in a safe location. Authorities then began to question the residents, seeking to understand more about the criminals' modus operandi. The impact on the community. The local community, which was generally quiet, was shaken by the violent confrontation. Some residents, still incredulous, discussed the fear they felt upon hearing the gunfire. "I never thought I would see something like this so close to home," said a neighbor watching the operation from a distance. Community statements. "They were ready to kill someone," commented one of the hostages, still trembling. "It was a relief to see the police arriving. I didn't know if we would make it out alive." Conclusion and aftermath of the operation. After the operation concluded, the two suspects were identified as criminals with extensive criminal records, including involvement in robberies and other violent crimes. The seized weapons and the statements from victims and witnesses corroborated the actions of the individuals who were directly responsible for several thefts in the area. The operation ended with recognition of the work done by the involved police officers, but also raised new questions about the increase in violent confrontations in residential areas and the need to intensify the presence of security forces. The complete story will be investigated in depth in the next video on your channel Intrigue and Spying, featuring a detailed analysis of the case, highlighting police tactics, the role of forensics at the crime scene, and the challenges faced by law enforcement in combating crime. Meanwhile, in another part of the neighborhood, a witness was reporting an ongoing armed robbery. Two men allegedly broke into a residence, held the residents hostage, and locked them in one of the rooms of the house. One of the victims, who was still visibly shaken, described the terror they experienced. "They threatened us with weapons, threw me to the ground, tied up my children, and said that if anyone made a move, they would kill us all." The resident also reported that one of the criminals, nervous and impatient, was searching for money and valuable items, while another kept watch over the hostages. Pursuit and confrontation. The police, aware of the gravity of the situation, set out in search of the criminals. During the pursuit, a confrontation ensued. The suspects, who were armed with a .38 caliber revolver and a pistol, attempted to resist the police approach. "I warned you, raise your hands," shouted one of the officers, but the tension was palpable. The gunfire lasted a few minutes, with shots echoing down the street. Two of the suspects were hit and quickly neutralized. Ambulances were called to provide assistance, but upon arrival, both suspects were already deceased. The scene was cordoned off, and forensics were called in to investigate the details of the confrontation. The climate after the operation. As the operation unfolded, local residents began to leave their homes, frightened by the sound of gunfire. "I've never seen anything like this before. These guys were violent, willing to do anything," said a neighbor, still trembling as he recounted the event. "I just want to thank the police for getting here in time. I don't know what would have happened if they hadn't come so quickly." The police ensured that the crime scene was preserved for the arrival of the technical team, who would conduct a more in-depth analysis of the confrontation and the collected evidence. Witnesses were taken to give their statements and identify the bodies of the suspects. The criminals' weapons were seized as part of the investigation.